Yes, that's all right. Okay, thanks a lot. Let me start off by saying my name is Laszlo Goerke. This is joint work with two other colleagues from Trier. And well, I feel a bit embarrassed. We have two presentations we had now on very general topics, very basic ones, and I'm presenting something very little, trade unions and life satisfaction in Germany. I hope you're still interested, despite this narrowing of the topic, And let me start off with another remark by thanking the organizers for setting up the workshop. And then I come to the topic, so with two colleagues from Trier. And what are we asking here? We're basically doing what you suggested, put life satisfaction on the right-hand, left-hand side, and some things on the right-hand side. I'll show that in a moment, And we are asking basically, does membership in a trade union have an impact on life satisfaction? That's what we are going for. And let me motivate that topic a little bit. This is against the German background, institutional background. You can choose to become a trade union member or not. So it's a voluntary act, and you would expect that somehow if you do something, being an economist, you benefit from it. You're better off, however that's measured. There's a huge literature on job satisfaction in union membership. The idea being that better off in the context of work may be measured by job satisfaction. But the empirical evidence is at best mixed. So you find lots of studies finding negative correlations. So union members report less job satisfaction. Only recently, where's this? Only recently, I'm working on. There are some studies for the US, UK, suggesting positive correlations. Looking at Germany with one of the co-authors, we find a negative correlation, at least in OLS models, but not in fixed effects. So somehow with job satisfaction, it doesn't work out, the ex-ante expectation, But perhaps job satisfaction is sort of not the right measure, because trade unions or being a member of a trade union may capture other aspects which go beyond what is measured by job satisfaction. So our starting point is perhaps life satisfaction is a better measure if of this sort of first conjecture. If you are becoming a union member, you should benefit from that, because it captures all potential aspects. There's very little evidence on the correlation between union membership and life satisfaction. Very often cross-country or cross-sectional. What they report tends to be positive correlations, but not very robust. So in a way, that's what we identify, and that fits to the topic of this first session, labor, that there is very little on it and nothing really thorough. That was what we claim. Now, I will say a little bit about the data, the empirical approach. I skipped the heterogeneity, because otherwise you won't leave me enough time at the end. I talk a lot about the channels, and if you don't object, then I'll also talk about institutions, but I fear I won't do that. So let me say something about the contributions. What do? We present a comprehensive study of the correlation between life satisfaction and trade union membership for Germany. And actually, we do find robust evidence of a negative correlation. Union members report, whatever you do, almost less life satisfaction than comparable non-members. What we then do is to look at what we call channels by which this negative correlation may come about, which can help to explain it. And we find that job security, social capital, and concerns about the economic situation play a role. I'll outline that later on. And we look at subsamples and find, especially co-determination and collective bargaining. And these analyses suggest that this negative correlation, which I call robust, is particularly strong or perhaps concentrated to settings where unions are relatively weak. So where they don't have a great amount of influence. And that's what I want to show you in the remaining 25 minus X minutes. Sorry. So we use data from the ZEP. The main independent variable is trade union membership. That was asked in West Germany in 85 and 89, and East Germany in 90, and at irregular intervals throughout the whole of Germany. I have to stay here, sorry. So, what? No, I don't want to carry it, because then I stumble or whatever, yeah. But I try to stay here, sorry. So I have few constraints, but I optimize under constraints, yes. We have a set of socio-demographic characteristics as control variables, yeah, what we plug in on the right-hand side. Labor market characteristics, as you can see here, we focus on employed people, otherwise it doesn't make sense, yeah. And age between 16 and 65, and the time period you've seen, given the data provided by the ZEP. Now, here is some descriptive statistics. That's what we start off with. We have about 90,000 observations, about almost 20 of them are 20,000 are union members. And you see the life satisfaction is about 0.15 points lower for union members, just descriptively. Yeah? And basically look now, is that robust or not when we control for things. Yeah? But that's basically the data. You see some of the differences here, and you see that in many aspects, there are significant differences between members and non-members. Yeah, so important to control for it. Now, here's the estimation equation. This is, we do it in linear ways. We also have an ordered probit. Results are robust. Yeah. So left-hand side, life satisfaction. Right-hand side, control variables plus dummy for union membership. Yeah. And we also have OLS and fixed effects specifications, which will then have with individual fixed effects included. So that's basically what we do. And it's getting warmer and warmer. So if you want to fall asleep, keep that slide, the next one in mind. Yeah. The rest is building on it, yeah, or trying to show that my results or our results are not arbitrary. So two or three sets of regressions and in 3 columns and 2 rows. The first row looks at OLS, the second is fixed effects, just the coefficient on union membership dummy. This one only includes year and state fixed effects. This one demographic controls and that labor market controls. And you can see the estimated coefficient. If I look at fixed effects, about minus 0.6 out of this minus 1.5. So some of it is explained by covariates, but this remains. And you can see whatever we do, it seems to be more or less unaffected. So that's what I say, robust evidence, yeah? People are less satisfied with life if they're union members. Okay, that's down here. Now, heterogeneity, I'll jump or leave it out very briefly. We find this result particularly for males, less so for females, and particularly for early observation periods, and less so later on. But we don't find a positive correlation as some of other contributions have found for recent years. That's very briefly heterogeneity. And then I do the same thing as you did, Harry. I just jump over some slides. So let me spend most of my time on this idea of channels. That's where I would perhaps like to get some feedback. You may say it's going a bit in this direction of dashboards. I'm not quite sure, but the idea is the following. Union membership may be associated with certain outcomes, say high wages, and they could in turn directly affect life satisfaction. We haven't, for example, included wages in our right-hand side. Now, what we want to do now is to say, all right, let's estimate the whole thing again and take into account as additional control variable, as a channel, wages. Part of the effect may be going via wages. So if we take out the wage effect on life satisfaction, it remains in a way something potentially for the union. That would be this here. And we can see that potentially part of this negative correlation comes via a wage channel. With a wage, it's obvious, unions drive up wages. That shouldn't result in a negative correlation. So what we would expect is if we control for wages, the negative correlation, which remains, should become sort of stronger, more negative, because we take out a positive effect, which is captured. Now I don't want to say something without this channel. That's the basic idea, which we follow. And you could ask, what are these potential channels? We build on the literature, which is mostly looking at or hypothesizing positive correlations coming from the US, but some of the ideas are applicable to our negative correlation as well. Now, I've already indicated the wages. There's some evidence of a positive wage effect of union membership on for Germany, but very little, so it's not quite clear. We know this negative job satisfaction correlation, and in the literature, it's put forward the idea if union members have different job satisfaction, that may impact the correlation with life satisfaction. So if we sort of take out the job satisfaction, control for it, then there is something remaining, which is the other aspects of membership on well-being, which are not directly job-related. Then there's the argument that union members have more secure jobs, and probably you like more secure jobs, so that could also be a channel. Fourth channel would be union members have higher social capital, the idea they have more contacts to other people, they are more socially active, which drives up life satisfaction, and that could also impact on that correlation, if we look at life satisfaction. But potentially, like wages, making the remaining effect more negative. And clearly, if you're in a union, you are having, say, get information about the unions and stuff like that, which may draw your attention to economic circumstances to a greater degree, greater extent as if you are not a member. So people may have a different perception of the economic situation, may perceive it differently, potentially more negative. Usually unions are emphasizing the difficulties. These channels are not exclusive. Obviously, higher wages can increase job satisfaction. So that's not that they are not interacting. And clearly, they are not exhaustive. There can be more. And probably if I said now you only get lunch, if each of you names one additional channel which we can test, then I would go home with lots of additional channels, which I won't do because that's too much work. But but I hope it illustrates this point. Now you may say, it's like looking at the dashboard. We sort of look at the various things. We know the overall effect, life satisfaction, but we want to see what drives these effects. Is it the speed, your example of the car? Is it the use of petrol or whatever? Now, let me show you what we get. First step is there a correlation between membership and the channel? So do members earn higher wages? Yes. So outcome is always the channel, And is there a correlation? Are they less satisfied with their job? Yes, in OLS estimates, but not in fixed effects estimates. So it's not quite clear whether that channel works or not. They are more concerned about job security, members in Germany. They have higher social capital, so these channels seem to be possible ones. And they tend to have greater economic concerns, though again, not in fixed effect specifications. So we would say this channel 1, 3, and 4, we have robust evidence that union members are different than non-members. For 2 and 5, it's, well, it depends on what you want to focus on. So it's worthwhile to look at them. It's not just our claim that there's a correlation. So what do we do? Sorry. We have fewer observations because these channels are not, the data is not available for all observations. So we re-estimate our basic fixed effects specification for the smaller sample. Effect size is roughly the same. So sample doesn't drive results. Then we add one by one these channels, and you can see they are all significant, these additional variables. Yes, thanks. And the size of the estimated coefficient for union membership changes significantly, or say substantially, if we control for job security and for perhaps for social capital and for economic concerns. In these two cases, some of the negative, it becomes less negative. So these two channels, job security and economic concerns, or concerns about job security, they seem to explain part of that negative correlation. The social capital goes in the opposite direction. It becomes even bigger, the negative correlation. So from that, we conclude that lower perceived job security and greater economic concerns may constitute channels which can explain the negative correlation between trade union membership and life satisfaction. Greater social capital may represent a channel giving rise to positive correlation. And if you look at this last column where we put everything in, clearly it remains. Yeah? We control for 5 channels, but there's not much of a change, yeah, relative to the initial estimate. So certainly these channels don't explain what we observe. Now, given the comment I feared, I'll be very brief. Now, you could say in co-determined establishments in Germany, unions tend to be stronger, and where there's collective bargaining, unions may be stronger. So the effects may be different if you look at them. Unfortunately, we don't have the data for controlling for these effects, or we only have them in selected waves, as you can see here and there. So what we do is look at these waves where we have union information and can control for it and re-estimate, okay? Since there are very few waves, we can't do fixed effects, only OLS. And this is what you see. If there's no collective bargaining, the effect is strong and highly significant. If it's collective bargaining exists, the effect is gone. With works councils, similar effect, but significant sort of on the border. Eh? So it seems to be that here the music is playing. What we did then on top is to say, okay, let's separate firms into big ones where there's almost surely collective bargaining and works councils, and smaller ones where that may not be the case, and firms in a high union density and a low union density, yeah, in industries with. And what we find is that where unions are weaker, low union density, and smaller firms, the negative results appear. So from that, we conclude that this negative correlation is stronger in surroundings where trade unions are relatively. Now the same happens to me than with you, Kelsey. The decisive thing is missing, where unions are relatively weak. Yeah, the rest I've said. Given the waving, I'll stop here. Thanks a lot, and yeah.
Thank you very much. I think there's a lot of merit in asking these small scale questions. And I think in order to have this high level view of these things, we need to have lots more research on these small issues. So I wouldn't actually see that as a negative. I hate being that guy, but I want to ask you whether with the way that you actually look into mediation into these channels, whether you shouldn't actually choose a different methodology, because I think the way you estimate it right now, you introduce post-treatment bias in making the mediators control variables in your fixed effects regression. And I think even though this is not convince anybody of the causal identification police, but at least using Preacher-Hayes and jointly estimating the models, i.e. for us economists, structural equation models as seemingly unrelated regressions approach, I think you would make a little bit more progress in terms of looking into those channels. So I would suggest going into that. I know that has drawbacks as well in terms of you can't do that really with a fixed effects approach and whatnot, but I'm not sure putting these controls in really allows us to say anything about how the trade union variable varies. And I think with the indirect effect computation using Preacher Hayes, I think that would be a bit more convincing. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually had the same comment, so I'm happy not to be the guy who delivered it. Thank you.
Right. Sorry. So I was interested in whether it was actually the existence of trade unions in the sector which is driving the results rather than being a member in themselves. And part of that, I think, was cemented when you saw the collective bargaining element, and that didn't have a significant effect, because I thought that where you have collective bargaining, you don't need to be a member to benefit from it. And then it made me think about, well, over the long term, again, reflecting on Kelsey's comments earlier, that you need to look over the long term and whether true benefit to your life satisfaction to being a trade union member is actually whether your life satisfaction changes after you've become a member compared to before. Just reflecting on instances in the United Kingdom that everyone benefits, even if you're a member or not, or certainly from my union anyway.
Yeah, I was point well taken. We discussed that, decided not to do it since the paper was long, but yeah. That one answer to two comments. So I have more to you. The data doesn't exactly allow us to identify when people join, because the union question is asked at intervals. Yeah. So, you know, anywhere in between. And so we can say they are, we have life satisfaction every year, but we can only say they joined in the 3 or 4 years before. That makes it somewhat difficult to follow up this idea of, can we do go in that direction? But that's a data issue. It's not a good explanation why we don't do it. Yeah, we've been thinking about sort of long-term effects where that becomes somewhat weaker, is like, but haven't followed that up. Now, in terms of your collective bargaining argument, you're right with, say, why do you benefit as a member if you're in a collectively or in a setting where collective bargaining takes place? I would argue in the German context, thus far there is very little evidence on higher wages, so you benefit in different directions. That may be cases of you are better protected in conflicts with your employer and things like that. And that is something individual, which is not related to collective bargaining. Whether that is relevant here, I would to some extent think yes. So we would expect benefits of union membership also in collective bargaining settings individually, as in non-collective bargaining settings. Yeah? Because if you want to sort of have a dispute with your employer, then whether wages are collectively bargained or not doesn't really help much. Yeah? But that's we found that interesting. Yeah, that's you could say perhaps it's disappointed union members. They're the negative ones. Yeah? They don't get anything. Yeah, not even higher wages. Thanks.